I just wanted to make a short intro before this video begins. This is a cut down version of a stream I did with Jim Buck, who was the lead programmer of Twisted Metal 3 and 4 over a year ago. I wanted to compile the most enticing topics we talked about. The full interview will be linked if you want to watch that. Feel free to use any of these clips or segments for your own video projects. We discussed topics of Twisted Metal 3's physics engine, characters, Vigilante 8 making Twisted Metal 3 exist, even Twisted Metal 5. There was a lot of stuff discussed that was never brought to the public eye before that stream, so if you didn't see that stream previously, you will definitely learn something you never knew, so enjoy this behind the scenes look of Twisted Metal 3.
Did you say Sony doesn't have the source code for this game?
For Twisted Metal 1 and 2, no.
Oh yeah, Single Track has their source code.
Yeah, the Twisted Metal 3 is what it is because of that reason.
With Vigilante 8. So, that you said that game is why Twisted Metal 3 exists.
Yes. I don't know if Twisted Metal 3 would exist if not for Vigilante 8 in a very weird roundabout way. So yeah, Kelly Flock, who was running Sony America at the time, had probably seen some early builds of Vigilante 8 or heard about Vigilante 8 or heard that Interstate 76 was coming to PlayStation. And Interstate 76 was a hotly played game in our studio, and then he's like, well, wait a minute, this looks like a car combat game. Oh shit, we have this, Twisted Metal franchise, though, it's kind of following a little bit at the moment because Single Track and Sony had some issues with their relationship, but he's like, all right, well, I don't want Vigilante 8 to come out and they become the de facto car combat game over Twisted Metal. So, oh crap, we need to get another Twisted Metal out. All right, who's available? Oh, there's that team in San Diego that I sometimes visit and drink beer with, and they're rolling off a racing game. So they have a code base that, runs cars around. So it's a starting point, right? So that's kind of how that developed, basically. Just Kelly Flock going, oh shit. We need another Twisted Metal game out.
Yeah,
and
they wanted to monopolize the car combat.
Yeah.
So just no one else can have it. Only Twisted Metal, that's it.
And to be fair, like I knew like Adrian Stevens was like the lead or main programmer on Vigilante 8, and he was on the PlayStation developer news groups, as was I. So we knew of each other. We even, talked about best ways of using the Sony hardware and libraries. So we knew of each other. We knew what each other were working on, and we even met at a conference and all that stuff. And I dug Vigilante 8. I mean, we were working at Sony, and Sony, would have early builds of games. So like we actually played an early build of Vigilante 8. I don't know if that was okay or not, but once discs sort of arrive at Sony, they end up getting passed around sometimes. So we saw they had a pretty cool game. I mean, I dug it. Visually, it was great. It felt good. It was a nice version of its own car combat game. It wasn't doing Twisted Metal. It was doing its own thing. So it was pretty cool. I could see why Kelly Flock was concerned.
Is there anything about Twisted Metal 3 that we don't know? Like a secret Easter egg or code or something like that that people may not know?
I think I had posted somewhere not too long ago, maybe on Discord, all the Twisted Metal 3 codes, because I don't think they're all out, and I had a copy of them, so I think I posted those somewhere. One thing I can think of is that oil rig level. Wait, is oil rig 3 or 4? I sometimes mash together.
Oil rigs in 4.
Right, then there's something in the oil rig level. I remember we can talk about that when we talk about 4. No, in Twisted Metal 3, I can't really think of much else. So we ended up shipping that game because we had to. So there's some stuff that's unfinished. The one thing that stands out for me is the turbo effect. It's just this little puff of smoke that comes out the back, and I think there's a little tick, 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 tick sound for each frame.
Yeah.
That was something I put as a placeholder just early on, so that you're turboing. Literally, there was no time to do anything more on that other than what was there early on. And it just looks like a piece of crap turbo effect and sound effect. So that's the only thing that sort of comes to mind along that lines.
Yeah, I remember when you told me about the Twisted Metal 3 turbo placeholder. What would you have made it? Like if you could have redone this right now, like what would you change the Twisted Metal 3 turbo to actually look like? What was your idea?
Well, I mean, because I was so ashamed of the Twisted Metal 3 effect, I went all out on Twisted Metal 4. So probably Twisted Metal 4 is like what I would have ideally liked the Twisted Metal 3 to be. Like, I had full-blown animated flames, and artists had the ability of placing the points where the flames would come out of. Whereas in Twisted Metal 3, I think I just spawned them off at the center point of the car, which is stupid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went full hog on having this professional effect in Twisted Metal 4. So yeah, Twisted Metal 4 is what I would have liked to have seen in Twisted Metal 3.
It looks good in that game. Like it does. It kind of like reflects off the cars, like the side pieces and stuff. It looks nice.
Oh yeah, there's point lights associated with those. So yeah, it'll light up cars where they are. They fade in and like grow, and then when they turn off, they shrink and fade out. So it's a very dynamic effect. Like I'm like, yeah, I want this to be as dynamic as possible to make up for my crime in Twisted Metal 3.
Yeah, of course. I mean, even though I don't think too many people probably, I've never really heard complaints about the Twisted Metal 3 turbo effect, but I guess for like a personal level for you, I mean, you probably wanted to redeem yourself for it having a placeholder in the launch game. So
yeah, it could be I'm the only one that ever noticed what a piece of crap it was, and now I've brought it to everybody's attention. Now you can't unsee it, type of thing, and I should have said nothing.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's nothing to change anymore. Like, it's too late now. But if you had more time, if you had more time.
Yeah, exactly.
So I had a question about like the complaints after Twisted Metal 3. Like, because obviously this game was like publicly ridiculed by a lot of people, like, but like magazines and critics and everything were just super harsh on this game. Even if you know who George Wood is, I'm not sure if you know who that is. He even had a video. He had like the original gaming review show, we'll call it that. Or show. I use show really loosely, but he had a video saying the game was bad. Like, when you went into Twisted Metal 4, were you taking those criticisms like, we need to do better, or like was it like people are making fun of my work? Like, how did you take those criticisms?
I was fine. I didn't take it badly at all. I knew why they had their criticisms. They had no idea of the development situation. They had no idea that, like, for all they knew, this was Single Track's idea of what to take Twisted Metal to. They had, to evolve into the next Twisted Metal. They had no idea that, like, no, there was no Single Track, and there was no Twisted Metal 2 code or Twisted Metal 2 art to start with. That this was started from scratch by completely different people entirely. Like, nobody knew that. You would know this now because, the internet, everything.
It was in that
knows
article
now.
To just like interrupt for a second. The article does say it. It does say, let me read it.
I mean, that's true. I'm curious what percentage of people read that article that bought the game versus.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true.
Like a good example. We were, God, where the hell was it? In 2000, I want to say, or maybe 99. I was at some conference, and we were there with Kelly Flock. I think Kelly Flock was giving a talk. That's what it was. He was giving a talk at a conference. I was in the audience with a couple other, Twisted Metal team members, but I think this was after we were done with Twisted Metal. And after we were done, there was a guy at this conference. This had to have been a game developers conference or something, but there was a guy there that wasn't in game development or anything. I think maybe he somehow gotten a pass to go check out E3 or game developers conference. Like, he approached us, like we were leaving that room with Kelly Flock because we were going to do beers or something like that. And there was a guy that looked completely stressed out, completely sweating, coming up to us, like out of breath, and like looked very upset, visibly upset, and was like asking us, why did you remove this? Why did you remove that? Like I was like not. I was starting to get a little worried for our safety. Like this guy kind of was freaking me out a little bit.
They were that unhinged. Like these people were getting angry, like coming up to you and getting angry about Twisted Metal 3 and 4.
This was the only time something like that happened. But like that dude had no idea that we started from scratch with this, and we had to. It wasn't that we removed something. We had to add literally everything in the game, and just some stuff we didn't have time to add. So that's the only kind of anecdote I have along those lines as far as, what people knew or didn't know or don't understand.
That you had a real life interaction with someone that got mad at you about Twisted Metal 3.
And that was the only one, thankfully. I mean, you probably heard worse stories about other franchises or people.
I mean, especially with online prevalence. Yeah.
Yeah, or George Lucas, you ruined my childhood.
Yeah.
You know, when Episode
Yes.
4 came out, like, come on, man.
Yes, of course.
That
That's
type of thing.
some people take it a little too seriously, I think. But
So
bit.
yeah, what was your original question? I don't know if I just deviated from it.
just
entirely.
oh no, I was just asking if you took those
Oh, how I
criticisms,
took
like
it.
did it help you and motivate you to do better with the fourth game?
So with the fourth game, I don't think those criticisms helped us because we knew everything that was bad in the game. We knew. We didn't have time for it. So we're like, Twisted Metal 4, let's just polish everything that we didn't have the chance to polish in one, like the turbo effect or other things. Let's improve the physics. Like, oh, you couldn't turn in midair. You couldn't turn really in place on the ground. All right, well, those are implemented. The flipping over sucks. All right, well, let's see what we can do to reduce that or make it less painful than it was. Those were my things because I was on the physics. Also visually, like I didn't like the cars were very flat lit in Twisted Metal 3. Like everything was lit on the car uniformly, so there was no directional lighting. So I wanted these cars to look more 3D, because the other thing was we wanted to do more in this game. So we wanted to tell the artists, all right, you had 230 or 250 maybe quads and triangles that you could use to make these vehicles. We're now going to give you 80. So your car polygonal budget is cut by 1/3, but we want to do that because we want to make these cars look better by adding dynamic 3-dimensional lighting, reflection mapping, specular, fake specular lighting on these things. And the cars in Twisted Metal 4, as a result, look way better than Twisted Metal 3 with 1/3 of the polygon budget. So we knew where we wanted to improve. Gameplay, I left that in the hands of the producers and the designers and those people that had that hand in it. So I don't know what they did on that front. But I know what I needed to do, just because I knew this stuff sucked from Twisted Metal 3, independent of what I heard after the fact. I don't think anything that I heard after Twisted Metal 3 shipped surprised me. Like I knew what I would hear.
Yeah, because I mean, Twisted Metal 3 was kind of just set up to fail, which I think people overlook that a lot, but it's like they had a completely new group of people that just had to work on a game from scratch, and they just, I don't know, you did what you could, really. That's all you can do, working like 20 hours a day.
Yeah. Oh, and I killed myself on both these games. I mean, for 2 years, I was basically working 6 days a week, 16 hours or more a day. I mean, I would come in at maybe 10 o'clock in the morning and leave at 3 o'clock in the morning, like for 2 years nonstop. That sucked, but it was what was required to get this game done. Like if those of us that crunched our asses off did not crunch our asses off, neither one of those games would have shipped, I think.
Yeah, especially I would definitely say that with 3 for sure. Like that game would not have released if, unfortunately, you guys did not work 15 hours a day. Like it definitely would not have shipped.
Yeah. I mean, back then the royalties, at least for this game, made it worth it. And Sony was very generous with their royalty program. But yeah, I probably would have preferred not to have crunched like that. But it helped my career since, I think. I still use a lot of like what I learned with physics and math and all that stuff back then. I still use a lot of that now.
What, for you, like with these games, do you think that, like we'll start with Twisted Metal 3. Do you think that Twisted Metal 3 turned out good? Like, do you think it was worthy of the Twisted Metal name?
Hard to say. I mean, I think we were generally proud of what we shipped, given the constraints. I mean, knowing what I know of the series, and I played a shitload of Twisted Metal Black when that game. That's my favorite Twisted Metal game, is Black.
Yeah.
If that is meant to represent Twisted Metal and also what I had played on Twisted Metal 1, because I played a lot of that before I got into games, and I was too busy making games when Twisted Metal 2 came out. Maybe it's not worthy of the Twisted Metal name quite. But at the time when there was just only 2 other Twisted Metal games out, I think maybe it seemed to be worthy of it.
So you don't think the game aged well, or do you think it aged poorly?
I mean, it aged poorly in the way that all PlayStation 1 games age poorly. I'm just looking at, these huge pixels and the textures and all that stuff. Like, I would love to see a remaster of these games. Like, everything as is except just better graphics. Like, just high-res graphics. Everything as, like, like the physics behaving exactly as it is, just using the same, fixed point arithmetic and all that stuff. I would just love to see this with better graphics. And what does it look like in that case? I would be super curious. Sony, if you're listening, I'm a contract for hire if you ever want to, remaster these.
Yeah, I mean, they did re-release Twisted Metal 1 and 2 recently on the PlayStation 4 and 5, so these ones might be coming down the pipeline. I'm not too sure. It was just a re-release.
Did they do anything? But did they do they look different, or is it just the exact game?
No, it's just an emulated port.
So they didn't up-res. Did they do anything to sort of up-res things, or?
I don't believe so. I think they added like a rewind feature. So if they did port, it would just be a port of this game. It wouldn't be like an entire remake, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think they don't have the code, so I'm thinking that the most that they could do is sort of kind of doing what basically Game Shark does, the equivalent of just sort of hacking values in memory in order to sort of hack into up-resing something on this. But if can't even.
Did you say Sony doesn't have the source code for this game?
For Twisted Metal 1 and 2, no.
Oh yeah, Single Track has their source code.
That's the Twisted Metal 3 is what it is because of that reason.
Because they held that thing hostage. They wouldn't give that source code away.
They had a contract with Single Track such that Single Track did not have to give them source code. And after that, Sony's contracts were very Loctite with we always get source code.
Yes, so they definitely have it for 3 and 4. They definitely have the source codes for these games.
I mean, they must. I don't know where they would have it, but they had to back this up somewhere. I mean, it'd be crazy if they didn't.
Yeah, but, especially with the sales. Like, it was popular enough to warrant them keeping it.
Yeah, I mean, this would not be an easy thing. Like, if they said, hey, let's just give a team internally this code, get it running on PS5 as a native application, we'll up-res it. I mean, that would not be an easy project. That would be a lot of work to sort of get it compiling again, never mind, running on a PS5.
Yeah, I think it'd be best if they, like, fully remade it, probably.
Yeah.
Instead of porting it, honestly, but...
Yeah.
So, what about 4? Like, do you think 4 turned out to be a good game?
I liked 4. I might like 3 more, though. I think 3 was a little bit more visceral, but I like the visuals of 4. Like, that was the one thing I didn't like of 3. It just looks drab. So I loved how the graphics ended up turning out on 4.
Interesting. That's rare to hear someone... I mean, I just someone say that they actually like 3 more than 4.
I think because of the physics. Like, this is having like a box style physics, and the other 4 has a pyramid style physics. I have on YouTube a talk on how I did the physics for these games. Yeah. And I like the box feel better for these cars than I like the pyramid one. But I would like actually to see a blend of the two. Like, I liked on Twisted Metal 4 that you could turn in midair. That was really cool. I didn't think that was going to be possible to do, but then I figured out a way to do it, and actually it felt good. I wish we had that in 3. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a merging of these two games somehow. Like, the best of both worlds, basically. The Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, take the chocolate from the one, the peanut butter from the other,
Yeah, for sure. Because I think the biggest complaint about 3 is definitely the flipping over.
Yeah.
That's the one thing people, like, really hate, which was rectified in 4. Like, that was like it didn't really happen. It was instant when you flipped over. Like, you just instantly.
Yeah, we instantly. Yeah, that was something actually Bill Todd, I think, did. He had it. How about instant flip over? I'm like, that's gonna look stupid. And then they did it and it stayed in and everybody loved it. I'm like, yeah, so is what I know.
Yeah. So what about this? Was this animation a placeholder? Like, when you flipped over and the car just kind of just like teleported or disappeared and then just reappeared?
That wasn't. I don't think that was meant to be placeholder. I implemented that, and I think I implemented that as this is the most dynamic thing I can think of right now to sort of hide the fact that we're insta flipping you over. So rather than insta flipping you over, just shrink you and then expand you again. Yeah. I don't think there was no idea about some other effect for that. There wasn't an idea to have an effect at all. That was just something I decided to do because I didn't like the instant popping you over.
Yeah, I think it's just the one thing, and that and the levels as well. A lot of them are pretty flat in Twisted Metal 3, which I mean, like Was that just a choice, like a design choice, or was it like the physics, like if you flip over too much, like we want to make sure that doesn't happen, so we'll make the levels more flat?
That might be more of an artifact of the AI, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So the way the AI system is set up, it's it doesn't have a 3D notion of the world. It has more of a 2D notion of the world, but like levels. So there's like a bottom 2D level, and then there's a route that takes it to, you know, a second floor 2D level, and these were all deconstructed as quad trees, which is, you know, a way of sort of representing a 2D space. So I think this was more that. Like, actually, this is a funny anecdote. We had an early on, like once he sort of started to get an idea of how he wanted to do the AI and started implementing the AI, an artist had already created, I think, a couple of these levels. We had a meeting, but it was still fairly early on, but far enough along that like we shouldn't be saying things like I'm about to tell you what he said. But as the end of the meeting, we kind of all talked about what we were talking about, and then just he, in his very nonchalant way, not knowing what he said was a very profound thing to say, said, yeah, I think we're going to need to build these levels so they are all lined up on grids. And then like that was the end of the meeting, and like all the artists were like, wait, what? Wait, what did you just say? What did you just say? Are you kidding me? Like, because these things were all just going to look like squares and everything like that. But that's how his quad tree was set up. Like, quad trees are aligned on, you know, axes and grids and all this stuff. So that's, you know, that just sort of give you the mindset of what the AI is doing here and why some of these are flat like that. It's for that reason. But,
so,
you know,
interesting. So that wasn't just like that wasn't you guys like, oh, we just want to make flat levels. Like, it's literally like you had to because of the way the AI was programmed.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe the AI was programmed that way because we're like, hey, let's have a lot of flat spaces connected. But I think the AI definitely made it so that we had these restrictions for sure. It wasn't the physics. The physics was programmed to handle all sorts of. Once I had it so that we had a 3D mesh for collision, it didn't matter what that collision mesh looked like. It could have been as bumpy or as not. As far as the physics cared about. I mean, it might not be fun to drive over such a thing, but the physics could handle it. But the AI would not. That is really interesting, because that's the other thing people complain a lot about with Twisted Metal 3 is just the level design is very flat. But it's interesting, there's actually a reason for it, and it wasn't just like a choice of like, oh, let's just make flat levels. It's like you kind of just you were locked into it because of the programming. Yeah. Well, and thankfully, that whole I think we need to put our levels on a grid kind of went away pretty quickly.
Yeah, with Twisted Metal 4, yeah.
Yeah, this area looks like it's probably a little gridded, but we have a lot more organic-looking levels. So, you know, I think somebody had a serious talk with him, like, Mike, no, we can't just have grid levels. Sorry, you're going to have to deal with it.
So with Twisted Metal 4, when it came to that level design, like, was the AI like changed so you could have, because that game has way bigger levels, have more high grounds, more areas to go. Did anything have to change with the AI's programming to allow for that?
I don't think he did a lot of changing of AI. I mean, he would be able to speak to better than me, but I don't recall any major significant AI overhauls here. I mean, he definitely developed it further, but I think it was just, you know, more incremental than full-blown overhauls. Because he actually, for Twisted Metal 3, I think AI was basically all he worked on. But in Twisted Metal 4, he was also having other major tasks as well. So he definitely was not working on AI the whole year like he was for Twisted Metal 3. So yeah, I don't think the AI had any major overhaul for Twisted 4. Maybe he expanded it a bit for, you know, whatever we needed for Twisted Metal 4 that it couldn't do Twisted 3. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a universal praise, I think, for Twisted Metal 3 and 4 is the AI's behavior. Because in the other games, like, it feels like you're the only person that ever gets attacked, and these ones feel like they're actually like they engage with each other and the player at the same time. So like they'll shoot you, and then they'll shoot the other enemy, then they'll go back to shooting you, and it feels more, I guess, immersive and like a PlayStation 1 standard of immersive.
Yeah. Yeah. These AI cars are aware of each other. We were told early on in Twisted Metal 1 and 2, AI knew nothing of each other. If you ever saw AI attacking each other, it's because they happen to be on the same path going toward each other while happening to fire weapons. That's what we were told. I don't know how true that is.
I mean,
But,
from playing it, I can kind of see that because they never attack you unless it's on accident, or they don't attack each other unless it's an accident.
Yeah, yeah. So in our case, yeah, he's like, oh, I'm not doing that. He's like, these AIs are going to be aware of each other and they're going to fight each other, and we'll have some variables to tweak to what extent that's happening so that AI doesn't kill each other off, so the player can just go hide somewhere and wait for the level to end. Although I think that does sometimes happen.
Yeah, it does. It depends on your difficulty, but they always prioritize you. Like if you're around, they'll always shoot you, but they still sometimes like shoot stray missiles at each other.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So it was definitely more interesting. I think I really like the AI in these games more than the single track and incog games, just because of that reason alone.
Yeah.
It makes it more enjoyable overall, I would say.
Totally.
The last question that I have is Twisted Metal 5. Was that like actually on the table as a game?
So, yeah, kind of funny story about that. So we left Sony in 2000, maybe 4 months after we shipped this to start our own company. And around that time, I think Small Brawl came out. I think like I saw it in the shelf in GameStop. I'm like, what? Like I hadn't heard of this existing or coming out or anything, and which was shocking because it's like I was working at Sony when this had to have been worked on. It's very strange I would not have heard of this. And this was after like when I was still at Sony before quitting, like after Twisted Metal 4, we're like, oh, we're all moving on to PS2. Everything's PS2. We're giving up PS1. Nobody's doing PS1 anymore. PS1's dead, blah, blah, blah. So when Twisted Metal Small Brawl came out, I'm like, wait a minute, is there an opportunity here for maybe a Twisted Metal 5? Like, we were trying to get a contract with the company to do a game. And I'm like, well, what better pitch than to, hey, the guys that know the Twisted Metal 4 code base in and out, like 3 of us programmers of that Twisted Metal code base left Sony to start a company. Like we could get that code and make a Twisted Metal 5 before the end of the year, no problemo. So we actually put together a pitch, a proposal document, and talked to Alan Becker of the Santa Monica studio. Like initially we sent him an email asking him, hey, what do you think of blah? And he's like, hey, yeah, let's do a phone call on blah date at blah time. So, I mean, we got as far as a phone call with him. It didn't get much further than that, though. But the fact that it got that far at all, was interesting and potentially promising. But sadly, it did not happen.
I'm shocked, honestly. I figured they'd want to do Twisted Metal 5. I mean, I know Small Brawl did. I mean, clearly you didn't know about the release of it, so it's like it didn't sell very well. Even though I still think it's, in my opinion, it's one of the best games in the series. I think it's a really good game.
I liked it. I picked it up and played it a fair bit. I didn't play it as much as Twisted Metal Black, but I probably played it maybe the third most of the Twisted Metal games. I thought it was pretty cool. And for me, it was promising enough that, like, you know what? I could see a Twisted Metal 5. Because I think at that point, I did know about Twisted Metal Black coming out for PS2. And I'm like, but I think this Small Brawl, I could envision a world where Twisted Metal 5 on PS1 could still be a thing, even though Twisted Metal Black was coming.
Yeah. Because Small Brawl came out after Black did, which is interesting. Came out.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it came out like 6 months afterwards, which is interesting. They probably didn't want to release it on PS2, I think, because they wanted to avoid competing with their own game. Because obviously, Goodrich he worked on Small Brawl, of course. So,
yeah, that's cool.
So I believe he said before that he wouldn't mind working on a Twisted Metal game again, honestly.
Oh, I totally would. Yeah, I would be all in for that. That would be an awesome project that I would totally go back to.
Okay, let me see. Phil says, would Primeval have had a story in Twisted Metal 3 or even as a playable character? Like, because when I use them as like Game Shark cheats, they do have unique passwords, which I thought was interesting.
So the way Game Shark works, it's basically it's called a Game Shark code, but it is a the code consists of a memory address and a value to put at that memory address. And probably in Twisted Metal 3, I had implemented like an array of Boolean values that said whether or not this character is playable, this character is playable, this character isn't playable. So I'm guessing that Game Shark code probably pokes a 1 value into the memory address where Primeval's, you know, playability is set to false, and putting a 1 in there sets it to true. As to whether it would have had, what was the question about it having a story or something?
Yeah, like a story or playable, like an actual playable character. Like, was it planned?
So, a couple things like that. That character or that boss came very late in the project. It's also a massive vehicle. So the reason why Darkseid and that character are not playable without a Game Shark code, I think, is because it shows off like the fact that it can, you know, the physics will get cars caught on corners. Like if it's going off of a, you know, a ledge, sometimes the back corners of the car, you know, can get stuck on there and the car can kind of hang. That can happen with the normal size cars, but with the huge cars, you can get yourself into even worse trouble with those things. And I think that was determined early on, like, yeah, these big cars, because of how our physics is set up, it wasn't designed for big cars. We don't want these playable by people because they're going to get themselves stuck up on things, and this is just going to make the game look bad, you know, all the time type of thing. So I think that was really the thinking behind those. But I think in particular with Primeval, you know, there just wasn't enough time to even develop anything with that. No painting, no, you know, nothing for that thing.
Yeah,
you know,
especially because
in
the manual it says that he's too busy torturing souls to show up because you didn't have time to create the character. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah, and never mind get an ending movie made for him and all this stuff. Because those were also all those ending movies were outsourced to a company here in San Diego, and you know those had lead time and all that stuff. Like there was just no way.
Oh, okay. Because someone actually asked who animated the endings of 3 and 4, like who did all the artwork for them, and
yeah, that was a company called VSI, Visionscape Interactive, I think. I don't know if they still exist. Like I knew those people pretty well. That was Tammy and Matt McDonald that ran that company. Yeah, they did all the 3D sort of, you know, pre-rendered stuff for our games. They did a lot of work with Sony for that type of stuff. But yeah, they would. So sometimes you'll notice a difference between a character that shows up in an ending movie and the painting of that character or whatever. That's because either things changed or we didn't have a painting ready yet, and they just kind of made up something. You know, like things happened at such different times that they ended up being different. You know, or maybe something didn't match in the manual that ended up in the game, because you know there's months of lead time to get those manuals printed and all that stuff.
Yeah. So do they do So they did the manuals as well. Like that had nothing to do with you guys.
They didn't. I only just used the manual as example of like lead time. I actually don't know who did the manual. Maybe Sony Marketing did that or something. But no, those guys only purely did 3D pre-rendered stuff. That was kind of their specialty at that time.
Okay. This one's more. What were you gonna say?
Go ahead. I was gonna say we had so for Twisted Metal 4, they did the ending movies, but all those images you see in the menuing system, those like background images, you know, the different, you know, new game, whatever options, that was done by an entirely different company. That was, I remember who that was that did that. Some company, I want to say in Seattle. So we had a couple different art houses that were working for us on Twisted Metal 4.
Interesting. Because I'm not sure how the endings of Twisted Metal 2 were made. I mean, I'm assuming they were outsourced. At least I can assume that, but I don't know. I doubt they were made in-house, so.
Yeah, I have no idea either.
Oh, that's actually a good question by Deva. He says, why was S.H.I.E.L.D. removed in Twisted Metal 3?
Removed from what? Twisted Metal 2? Because
it wasn't included, and then you guys re-included it in Twisted Metal 4. So
yeah, we just didn't have time to add it to Twisted Metal 3 because again we started from scratch We didn't start with
it's-
Twisted Metal 2 code and remove Shield. We just had Twisted Metal. We had Kart World Series code that didn't have Shield yet. We never had time to add it until Twisted Metal 4.
Okay, so it's basically most of the stuff, like a lot of the questions can be answered as we didn't have time. As I see, like that's what I've gotten a lot of, like that I've kind of put together, is just like you guys just couldn't really put as much as you wanted to into it because you just couldn't, like you didn't have time.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing to understand is that we didn't remove anything. We just didn't have time to add certain things.
Yes, that you wanted to, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, if you look up Kart World Series, CART World Series, it's like an F1 style racing game. If you look up videos of that, that was the starting code base we had on January 3rd or 4th, whatever that Monday was in 1998 when we started Twisted Metal 3. That was our starting point, was exactly that game.
Yeah, that's why you had the speedometer from the game on the side of the screen.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
In that early build. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine molding that into, what we're watching on the stream right now. So we had to, remove Formula One cars, add back in more 3D physics. I had to go to more 2D physics for that game, add more of the 3D physics from Rallycross, and then figure out a way to, because those are also flat tracks in Kart World Series, because that's how open-wheeled racing car games are. But we wanted a more 3D environment. So add, colliding, being able to drive and navigate and collide around a 3D environment. Also add AI for that. Oh, there's no weapons in Kart World Series because, cars don't typically shoot each other in the real world. So now we have to add weapon system. So yeah, I mean, it adds up, greatly once you realize, oh, we got to add this, that, the other thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, we would have loved to add all these things. I'm sure Shield was talked about for this, but just didn't have time because you need to come up with, the system for it, the effect. It's not like this is 5 minutes to add type of thing,
Yeah, of course. What do you remember anything about Darkseid or Primeval, like the concepts? Was there anything written for those characters at all? Because in the manual it says like Darkseid couldn't show up because or Primeval couldn't show up because he was too busy torturing demons, and Darkseid he doesn't reflect light, which is obviously we didn't have time to put these in the game. Is what I'm saying
that is exactly what that means. I mean, those
a funny way for kids to see.
Yeah, for sure. Primeval came very late in the game as far as a vehicle design goes. I don't recall any concept or anything for it. I think same thing with Darkseid. I want to say that also kind of came late in the schedule. I don't recall seeing that vehicle early on. I mean, that said, like, I was mostly just working on the tech side of things. I didn't involve myself too heavily into any kind of design or game balancing or what characters should come back and what characters shouldn't and all this stuff. I mean, the character I was always playing when I was playing a shitload of Twisted Metal 1 was Crimson Fury, and that never came back, and I don't know if I even tried to pitch that or anything. But that said, it came back sort of as a create a car character in Twisted Metal 4.
Is that where it came from? Like, was that your idea to put that, like, I want a car that looks similar to it, I guess, for Twisted Metal 4?
Doubt it. I don't recall, but I doubt it, because I was, especially with the Create a Car stuff, like Create a Car came so late on, I was so against this idea. I thought it was a huge risk to our schedule, or huge risk to our code base. I said, I am not going to involve myself in Create a Car even 1%. This is all on the guy doing the menuing system, and as long as he can get the data where it needs to be, that the rest of our engine code is expecting it, you guys do whatever. I'm not touching this stuff. So yeah, I am highly doubtful that I had anything to do with that car showing up, just because I didn't believe in this feature, although it seems to be liked. So
yeah, it's a cool it's a
cool
cool aspect of the game for sure, since they all have their own individual stats.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to see, like, they have small, and it's not like they all kind of are bad in the game, I would say, like, at least at a character standpoint, but at least it's something different. And especially as a kid, it's like you're probably gonna think that's super awesome as a kid. So I mean, at least I know I did when I was a kid. I thought it was so cool, even though it was a lot less cool than I thought it was, but at least I noticed that when I got older, of course. But it's not hard to impress a kid. But
what one cool thing about the creator car stuff is those battle cries. A good half of those
Yeah.
are our team members actually that got in the
You
sound
got into
studio
the
and
studio
recorded
and
themselves.
and you guys recorded yourself, or did you not do it?
I didn't. I didn't do it. Now I regret it. It would be kind of cool to have had a, because some of those guys are actually having IMDb credits as a result of having their voice in the game. That'd be kind of cool. I'm in the IMDb credits as like an engineer or something, but it'd been cool to actually get a vocal credit. But yeah, so I didn't do it, but a handful of team members were easily half of those battle cries.
I thought they were funny. They got to be references to stuff, I'm assuming, but they were definitely funny though. I thought they were all the battle cries for the. So the first thing I wanted to ask about this is the Calypso's Revenge tagline for Twisted Metal 3.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was like an actual idea or if like I told somebody, hey, we're creating a disc, let's have a loading screen because we want to replace whatever, because this code base came from first Rallycross then Kart World Series. So, initially there was some Kart World Series stuff in here, and I'm like, all right, I need a loading screen that's Twisted Metal 3. And I don't know if an artist just kind of made up a tagline or if that was a potential theme we were going down. I don't recall which. I mean, it was so early on because this build is from January 30th of 98. I mean, this was literally
that's early.
3.5 weeks of us working on the game.
Yeah, it's going to be a nostalgia trip for you.
Yeah, so if there was even any idea of, oh yeah, this is going to be called Calypso's Revenge, it wasn't a very developed idea by that time. So yeah, I don't know anything, and nothing ever came of it. Of course, there's and revenge on what? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I guess him getting dropped in the hole and minions ending in the previous game, like that's all I could think of. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's what it referred to or what. I'm not sure who came up with the revenge part.
If anything, Twisted Metal 5 could be called Calypso's Revenge,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. It would make sense. So,
yeah.
Let's see. Let's pull up this. I wanted to talk about Washington.
Yeah.
You said you use this for like physics testing ground, right?
I use it a lot. Yeah. There's the way it works is there's a few cars I will use throughout a dev cycle and a few levels I'll use throughout a dev cycle, and then the rest I almost never use. This was one I used quite a bit. Yeah, so this used to be much bigger and much more involved.
I can tell from the gameplay. It's crazy. It's huge.
Yeah. So there's a few reasons we would have pared it down, and I'm not sure if it was a combo of them. But one is obviously draw distance. You can even see that here. I mean, just
the level's not even constantly. It's not even loading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with people battling, it'd be crazy.
Yeah, we only go out a certain distance. I mean, as we optimize later, we were able to go out further and further. But that one would have needed quite a far draw distance that I don't think we were able to achieve. So that's probably one reason it got cut down. Another is possibly for gameplay reasons. After this got further along than it is in this video, and they started playtesting it, maybe they felt it wasn't that fun. Also, the artist that was working on this, he wanted to do a lot of crazy stuff with this, like you shoot this thing, a rocket launches out of here, blows up the Washington Monument, sets off this other chain reaction. Like, he really wanted to go all out on this, and I think we also felt some of those ideas were just not doable.
Yeah,
and might not even be fun. Like, might be a lot of work to get this whole chain reaction of destruction down, and it's just a one-off thing, for a thing that might not be fun. So yeah, I think it got cut down for probably those reasons. I think the same with Egypt. Egypt was another one. Like, you'll probably scrub to Egypt at a certain point.
Yeah.
That one I'm not as familiar with because I wasn't using Egypt hardly at all. Like, when I see some of these Egypt videos, I'm like, that was a level in our game, because I was rarely in that level. But it did start out much bigger, and I think for the same reason, once it got played a bit, maybe it was realizing like, this is a little boring, and also the draw distance issue. So they might have pulled that size in for those reasons for that as well, because those are probably the two most wide open levels, I think.
Yeah, Egypt in the launch game is definitely wide open. I think I would say it's the most wide open in the game, and then Washington's more flat. Like, it's just like the White House, and then just a small arena.
Yeah, I think it was decided like, hey, how about an arena where they just sort of boxed in, just this one area in some weird futuristic society, and this is just a pure death match rectangle, at that point.
So with the postal truck, was this ever going to were you going to try to go forward with this?
Huh.
I mean, obviously you'd have to change it because of the legal reasons, but
I don't know if somebody just like, hey, what's an obvious thing to put in here? Oh, a guy going postal, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they did that just as, well, this will be something we'll use for now while we're developing the game, developing the physics and all that stuff, and they just knew, like, yeah, we're not going to ship with this. Or if a build went up to Foster City and legal saw it and just kind of cropped themselves and said, no, do not do that.
Yeah, you'd be getting calls from the legal teams.
I mean,
fast.
that is the logo right there on the back of the truck. I mean, there's no way.
And plus, I have on the screen, there's a McDonald's logo, there's a FedEx logo, there's a Coca-Cola logo, there's a Sanyo logo, there's a couple other ones there that, like, clearly, unless you're getting paid, like, to sponsor them, or getting sponsored by them, they're just probably placeholders.
Yeah, I mean that was meant to represent that part of England, so or London. So I don't know if maybe those were actual ads at the time when they were sourcing art for this, but yeah, there's no way we could have shipped with that unless we had some deal with them.
Yeah, of course.
By the way, that miles per hour gauge, that is directly from Kart World Series.
That's the same one. That's the same one.
Yeah,
with Kart
this
World?
was before that got replaced. I think it is anyway. I think the one from Kart World Series was a black font on an LCD background, but I think it's still the same font at this point.
Yeah, and then this BMW, it's clearly a BMW. Like, there's nothing else to say about that, clearly.
M3, yeah. Well, we had I think Barry owned it. Did he own an M3? He owned a BMW. So he was a big BMW fan.
So yeah,
I'm sure he's the one that made this car. So yeah, it's not a surprise that's here. But yeah, I think that showed up in Twisted Metal 4 as a Create-A car.
Yes, it did. I know when you said that to me, I noticed it and I was like, oh yes, this is the Create-A car. Like, it's the same one.
Yeah.
That's from that. So it just got ported over. Do you remember anything about this Hangar 18? Like, early on, like, it's Area 51. The name probably wasn't in place yet.
I don't remember anything specific about it. I mean, I look at it now and I'm like, it's missing all the blue.
Yeah, it's very flat color-wise.
One thing I remember from that article earlier, I think it says something in there about, like, one idea was to shoot all the switches and the UFO would come landing. I don't know if we ever had that idea.
Let me check and see the article real quick. I can see if it says something about that.
Yeah.
I think it mentioned probably in the second one. Yeah, it says knock out all the switches and open up a secret place within Area 51 level. Is what it says.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's talking about underneath the UFO, because when you blow up all the switches, it opens up a laser barrier that you can go up and teleport on the top area, and there's a UFO flying around. I don't know if it's talking about that.
It gets you to the level weapon, which I think probably the idea of a level weapon came about after the fact of this article for sure. So yeah, there might have been all sorts of ideas in this that kind of ended up getting changed because, like, oh well, we can't do that, we can do this instead, type of thing.
This is there's a North Pole in here as well, and it looks completely different from the original game. It's obviously more flat.
So this was the first thing that we got going in Twisted Metal was an ice level. I remember that being the very first, and there was no house. This was just all flat. They because we had come from two racing games where basically everything was a height map. So we basically had a 2D sense of the world. We basically, for every X and Z point, there's only one height. But in Twisted Metal, you want to be able to go over things and under things, and you want to be able to go through a tunnel, but then later be able to drive above on top of that tunnel. So this, I think there's a tunnel in this particular level that that was the reason why that existed, was for me to start to get physics going that had an idea of being able to go over and under things, like a whole 3D world rather than just the 2D height map that we had previously. So this was the first thing that existed for that.
You did this all by yourself, right? Like the physics engine? Like was that all you?
Yeah, I was 100% physics from scratch. I mean, it started from Rallycross. developed it a little further for Kart World Series. They developed it a little for TM3 and then for TM4. But yeah, that 100% from scratch physics, my own. There was no such thing as middleware back then, and certainly nothing that could run well on a PS1. So I had to figure this out all on my own.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a rough time as well. Because I think it's the most criticized part about this game is probably the physics, but I mean,
Yeah, because it's a simulation style physics as opposed to like Twisted Metal 1 and 2 weren't really using driving physics because Dave Jaffe wanted it to be like a Mortal Kombat but with cars.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was how I think he kind of pitched it. And there's no simulation driving physics, if that's your sort of mantra, of course. But since we had 10.5 months or 9.5 months to deliver a game, we had to use our physics engine from our previous driving games. So that was, what would ship with this. But I tried to do what I could to make this, twisted metally as possible. But yeah, it was never going to be perfect in the time frame we had.
I have Egypt on the screen as well, so you
Yeah,
can see how much. I don't know if you remember the final version, like the final level. I'm not sure how it look. If
I
you remember how it
don't
looks,
too much, only because this was a level I was not using for my testing as much as
it's
other
very
levels.
short. This is part of a trailer that was released in 1998. That's why the quality is so pixelated. Because I don't know if this was on TV or if it was on maybe a disc, maybe like a PlayStation Underground disc or something. But the level is much more wide open. There's
Mhm.
water in there. There's some foliage in certain spots, and this obviously isn't present in the launch game.
Mhm.
So it's. I was just wondering,
Yeah,
like, you
I
don't
don't.
remember anything?
Well, this. I'm trying to think what this is because this wasn't like a commercial. Commercial. Yeah, this. If this was a trailer, then yeah, this had to have been on a PlayStation, one of those PlayStation discs, and if so, that was early on. Like this, they would have had to have had an early version of the game in order to make that in time, basically. So I could see that. Yeah, this may have changed, like say late summer, early fall, even
Yeah,
potentially.
because all these other levels are finalized. Like the new North Pole, um, the London's finalized here, and everything is. It's all finished. It's just that level that was different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those other levels that you named, those were levels that were developed starting early on. Like North Pole started in January. Egypt could have possibly started in summer. Um, so yeah, that doesn't surprise me.